Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Finding Me on the ITV networks today with our very special guest Raashida Khan. Raashida has been on the show before and we have discussed the books that she has written. We're very honored to have her again with her latest release. And I think that this one is a bit more intriguing. It takes a different kind of a story, but I would leave that to Raashida to unravel for you and perhaps to entice you. Again, she has written with much passion, and one can see and begin to understand the frailty of human emotions that come into play every single day. So with that, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Raashida.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's wonderful to be back again, Quraysha. Jazakallah for inviting me.
No, you're welcome. And I mean, it's odd again. After the last few encounters, we were sitting next to each other in the park, and now it's a new world. I guess we have to get used to the changes. Eh?
Yes, this is our new normal.
But I think that the COVID-19 perhaps was maybe very positive for you, very constructive, because you took out a new book in that process.
Alhamdulillah, I must say, look, in terms of work time, for me, it didn't really affect me that much. In fact, I had more time because I didn't have as many of my normal clients. You know, I do proofreading and editing and content creation for some clients. I didn't have any of my normal clients. So I had more time to write and more time to reflect. And yes, so this book was in the final stages of the last couple of rounds of editing just as lockdown hit, and the last few rounds of editing and proofreading took a few months, and then I had to take a decision. Do I wait for lockdown to be over or do I proceed with the launch? And I said, Bismillah, let me do this. Who knows when the lockdown is going to stop. So I said Bismillah and I decided to launch. So I did an online launch this time. Yes, for the first time.
But I mean, it's from what I've been gathering about the statistics during lockdown, it shows that more people started to read during lockdown. My daughter was telling me, she said that people were selling, online stores were selling books much faster. There was a greater demand for books, and there was an awakening perhaps amongst people who were sitting at home, decided to pick up a book and to start reading. So it must have been very beneficial for you as well.
Alhamdulillah, I must say, if that is really the case, then we're thrilled about that because it's quite a struggle to encourage reading. Sometimes you feel just because you're an avid reader, everybody reads, but it's not so simple as that. A lot of people don't read, but yes, I must say, during lockdown, more people have been reading. Of course, they've watched more Netflix too, but I think it's a balance. And many more people had time to start writing, and I think that's also a wonderful thing. There are many people who thought they wanted to try their hand at it, or who suddenly were inspired, or because they had time on their hand and they were reflecting on what's going on with the situation, they were able to put pen to paper, and a lot of people have started writing. So I think it's very positive. I think it's a very positive step in that sense. Yes, lockdown came with its challenges, but it also came with its opportunities.
Rashida, tell us a little bit about The Cursed Touch. I mean, why that title in the first place? The story does take very many, I think, detours and different kind of twists and tangles, but ultimately it has a lot of hope, a lot of passion, and a lot of empathy in it. But The Cursed Touch seems for me a bit intense.
The title.
Yes.
So it's amazing when you ask me about the title, because you might think that that's the first thing that I think of. Actually, no. So normally when I'm writing a novel or a book or a story, I have what I call like a working title. So I just have a working title. And sometimes the working title is adapted into the proper title, but otherwise deciding on a title takes lots of brainstorming. And there were a few things to consider. Yes, it was because of the journey that the main character Sandra Karim Edwards goes through, and her journey along the way. But when the book starts and when we meet her, we think she's this highly successful person, and then suddenly, because of circumstances and because of things that some of which are in her control and some of which aren't, her life starts unraveling, and everything that she touches starts being destroyed. She's actually becomes just she actually destroys everything that's good in her life. So that's her touch. It seems that everything she touches is cursed. So that's the title I decided to go on. Also, it sort of came up by the by, but I was thinking it would be nice because my writing is so deeply personal and intensive, and it's also a lot about the internal emotions. I thought it would be nice if all my titles could somehow link to a sense. I mean, I don't know if it's always going to happen, but Mirror Cracked was visual, it linked to the sense of sight. Fragrance of Forgiveness, the sense of smell. And this one, we wanted to see if it could be what it could be. And then the Cursed Touch seemed to work for Sandra's predicament, at least through most of the book.
That's fascinating. I would have never put that together, and I'm glad that you've highlighted this. So we can expect another one, right? Later on.
Of course, inshallah. I'm busy. I've started writing my fourth novel, Alhamdulillah. And yeah, so it takes a year to write a book, so don't expect it anytime soon, but I am working on that. In the meanwhile, there've been other projects that have been coming along the way which have kept me very busy. So shukr, I'm very grateful that at least I'm writing, even if I haven't been able to sell as many books, or with the Cursed Touch, normally at a physical event you do sell quite a few books. That's actually when you really sell books. I mean, after a launch you may sell the odd one here or there, or there may be some interest, but generally the biggest amount, the most number, would go at a launch. So I was very nervous about having a virtual launch. Having said that, though, many people who would normally not attend a physical launch attended the virtual one. So hopefully it will, bring out more new readers, a different perspective for people. Because a lot of the time people don't want to come out in the evening, or they're not from Johannesburg, so it's not possible to attend a physical launch if it's happening here. So a lot of different people attended the launch, and I was very happy for that.
That's wonderful. And of course, yes, one has to accept and recognize that there will be different moments that present itself for each particular opportunity. And we are in the COVID space, we're in a very different moment. So it will take time, but things will, I suppose, eventually even out. And if one considers your book, The Cursed Touch, let's just go there. When we last spoke, you had just finished, I think it was The Cracked Mirror that we spoke about. Had you already started with the Cursed Touch, or did that happen a little while after?
Actually, the idea of The Cursed Touch has been in my mind for a while. I always say I wish I had more time to write, because I have so many different ideas, story ideas for books. So the idea has been in my mind for a long time. You're talking about the new book, eh? The new novel I'm talking about. Yeah. So the idea has been with me for a long time. And in fact, at the beginning of the year, even while Cursed Touch was being with my editor, I started writing another book. And for whatever reason, I wasn't able to get into that book. I mean, I wrote about 25,000 words, which, when you first write the story, when you first write your first couple of versions is probably, for me, it's probably over 120,000 words. And then you whittle it down to, after you edit and change and chop and change. A lot happens, a lot of things happen. But 25,000 words for the first version is about, I would say, about a quarter of the book. But I just wasn't able to get into it. And then I was flitting through all of my journals from a few years back, and I came across this idea, and I thought, okay, this is the story that maybe needs to be written. So I have started writing the story. It's about a doctor, a female doctor, of course. I love writing about female characters, who's actually become addicted to painkillers. And it's her story. So, they'll always be controversial. They'll always be challenging. But then again, nothing so impossible and hard to believe. These things are happening on a daily basis.
Yes, certainly, of course. I mean, there's so much of reality in everything that you write. Let's come back to the story now of The Cursed Touch, and I want to unravel the story a little bit for the viewers. You have a phenomenal, a fascinating array of characters in here. But again, a very blended approach, and as you say, controversial. This time bringing in another contradiction of a mixed identity, a Muslim father, a Khalid mother, and of course, battling between different religious identities, between individual identities, reconciling with the home. I would assume also in sense dealing with a second wife issue or a first wife issue. Those are kinds of things that young people today are battling with. And it's intriguing also that you've brought in the colored identity, because there's been much about it in the South African social media. I don't know if you become aware of that. There was this argument of I don't like the word colored. That was written about it, things like that. So these are identities that are in flux all the time, but also very controversial and very conflicting. So just very quickly before we go to the break, just tell us, how did you build on this particular approach, and what made you go that way?
So I'm not sure why I decided to go that particular route, but this has always intrigued me, growing up in Durban, and of course everywhere, not only in Durban, everywhere in South Africa and everywhere in the world. There have been lots of instances of mixed marriages, and in this case, the couple weren't actually married. The man, the father, Sandra's father, is Muslim, Indian Muslim, and he's married. He has a family, and when we introduced to Sandra, or when we introduced to their life, he's married and he's got 4 children. And he had an affair with a woman in his office, and Sandra was the product of that affair. And this is something that living in Durban, in the city, in the city center, in town, we actually encountered a lot of those kinds of situations. And I'm sure, although I didn't know anybody personally, but a lot of the times the stories you would hear, it would be very difficult for those children to integrate sometimes if they went into either of the families. So it was very difficult. They always had a challenge with their identity. They weren't sure. It was difficult to know where they belonged, and often there would be a lot of discrimination against them from their own families, from their own siblings, because they had a different mother or a different father, and so they were racially split, so they were considered less than. So there was that challenge to deal with, and I think for Sandra as a character, she never really resolved that. She pretended, maybe that's not the right word. Maybe she actually believed that these things didn't affect her or didn't impact her, and she wasn't going to, give into feeling bad about this. And she actually was driven to succeed in spite of all of this, even though she completely cuts herself off from her family. Once she leaves home, she cuts herself off from her Muslim family. But obviously there are many issues that she hasn't dealt with. And when things start unraveling in her present life, I mean, we meet Sandra when she's in her early 40s. When things start unraveling in her present life, she's got no choice but to now deal with her past, to deal with all her issues of identity and acceptance and self-forgiveness. And so she undertakes both a physical and spiritual journey. She goes back to Durban for the first time since she left it when she turned 18. She goes back to Durban, or to stay longer. I mean, obviously she'd been there for work, but she'd never stay over. She'd never meet with the family. She'd never visit Durban or anything like that. She'd only go into the office for work and come back to Johannesburg. And she's actually forced to take that journey and start unraveling herself to her own self.
So, okay, there's many questions that I need to pick up from this, but we have to go to a break. When we come back, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. We'll see you when we come back. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me on the ITV networks with our very special guest, author Raashida Khan. And we're speaking about her latest book, which is The Cursed Touch. A very intriguing novel, this time with a fluid and a very mixed identity, and the challenges that come with that, not only in terms of your personal relationship, but in dealing with yourself. In this case, the enemy is not from outside, but from within. And I don't know, Raashida, if I'm correct in saying that, because in the other book, in the previous, from what I recollect of what you have written, it was always somebody else who was doing the harm onto the other. For example, in The Cracked Mirror, and we have the abuse of husbands and those kind of issues, or it's substance abuse. But in this case, you're fighting your own identity, you're fighting your own inner demons. So the enemy is within. It's not an external or something that, a physical, tangible object or person that you can actually touch, which is far more treacherous, I think, and far more perhaps weighty in terms of mental exhaustion, because you have to learn to deal with these particular issues. Gosh, but doesn't that tire you out? Doesn't it tire you out?
Me out. Well, yes, it tires me out, but it also keeps me stimulated and motivated, to get into the head of these characters, to be able to understand exactly who they are, and they reveal themselves to me as I'm writing. So, but you summed it up very well. This is a demon within that she has to deal with. This is very much her struggle. And it takes her even a while to acknowledge that this is the case before she can even start dealing with it. And it's amazing how her story unravels, because you haven't as yet mentioned the other character in the book, Hannah. The woman who supposedly is her arch enemy, or is somebody that the two women are diametrically opposed. And actually, both of them have challenges to deal with. Both of them have grief to work through, have trauma to deal with. And and even though they start off as sworn enemies, they start getting into a relationship which slowly and very, very difficult, in a very difficult way, leads to some kind of friendship, and that evolution actually helps the both of them. So they help each other, and in that way then help themselves get over whatever they've encountered.
But you've actually preempted my question, because from everything that you said in the previous segment, I was coming to this whole concept, or the notion of no man is an island unto himself, that you need people, that you need, family support, that you need structures, that you need people that you can depend on, speak to, turn to, perhaps, even if it's just in a moment of grief or in a moment of happiness. But we simply cannot live alone. And as Muslims, we fully understand that, because undergirded in the concept of being a Muslim is the notion of the ummah, a togetherness of everybody, so a recognition of the whole being and of the whole creation. And it's a very intriguing concept, and I think perhaps it resonates far more now during COVID-19, when we begin to realize how important family is. When you saw, elderly people isolated alone in their homes with nobody visiting them, the majority of deaths overseas in the Western European cities was in the old age homes, where people were left alone and with no care, no family. People were dying, and there was nobody to see them and nobody to bury them. So this issue that you touch on is very, very pertinent, and I think it's far more powerful than many begin to contemplate. But you've hit the nail on the head. What drew you into this particular, idea that this time you had to write about that particular bonding, the recognition of relationships and friendships?
So for me, I believe that very strongly. I believe that we're all connected, And the longer I live, the more I'm understanding this. And even apart from being connected with the people that we are in physical contact with, or in environmental contact with, so family, friends, people in our communities, we're also connected with everybody in the rest of the world. And we're also somehow connected to people that have come before us and people who will come after us. As soon as we understand this concept of us not being alone, yes, I think it's very important that we each have our strong identity, we each recognize who we are, and yes, that's part of it. But within that understanding of being an individual, I think who we are as individual is made up of the fact that we are engaging and interacting with others.
Mm-hmm.
Who of us has not been influenced by somebody? Or whether it's been a teacher, a parent, even your own children. We learn everything from our own children every day. We're learning so much. And I think that that's just an amazing thing, because that's what life is. Life is about growth and development, right? Life is about change. And to embrace it, we need to be able to engage with each other I love bouncing things off people. I love the idea of discussing things and making that mashwara, or even just checking yourself, because yes, we have ideas about things, or we understand things the way they can be, but really speaking, until we bounce it off anybody else, or until we're engaging with the environment and the people and how everything is engaging and interacting and connected, it's all in isolation. I mean, as a reality check, we need to be able to touch base with each other.
What I found very interesting about your book is that the recognition that part of this recognizing the importance of other people is also the journey towards, as you say, self-growth and self-development. But self-growth and self-development can only come from a conscious living. And very often, and I think, pre-COVID, and I hope it doesn't happen post-COVID, people were living very unconsciously. We tend to live unconsciously, and we go about hurting others without even taking any accountability of our actions, without even recognizing the harm that we are doing. It's all about self-satisfaction, self-desire, self-ego, those kinds of things. And Sandra was perhaps involved in one of those, and she could not understand the pain that Hannah was going through until, as you say, the curse touch, impacts on her life. And then you almost, if I may bring your previous book in, you're staring at this cracked mirror, the shattered pieces, and you're going to have to pick up your life and start putting things together. But before you can do that, the first step, the first recognition is to accept and to understand that you have had a role to play in harming someone else. And for that, there's a path to repentance, isn't it?
Yes, there is. And initially, Sandra wants to take no responsibility. She's actually, everything is about her. When you say the understanding of us, that we're not an island and that we're all connected, it was actually when we meet Sandra at the beginning of the book, she is that person. She thinks she is completely independent. She needs nobody. She's so much so, she's so independent that she's become ruthless, in her engagements and in her interactions with many people. And some readers have told me that they didn't like Sandra at all. They couldn't relate to her because really, well, yes, it is an extreme case. It is an extreme case. And she just takes everyone for granted. She takes everything for granted. And she's just living her life. Everything is about her success, her goals, what she needs, and how she's going to achieve everything. And so she's this very selfish, ice queen, as it were. And then because of circumstances, she's forced to look at things. And yes, that's a big part of it, because even when things unravel and Hannah originally confronts her, and even when her husband confronts her, she takes no responsibility. I can't be blamed. Those are her words. I can't be blamed for somebody else. And yes, everybody has to take their own responsibility for their own actions. But surely you realize there was a role you played. And surely there's some remorse. But then it does come slowly but surely as she starts understanding and engaging with Hannah more and more. And even with her husband, who, even though they're now separated, they seem to have a better relationship now that they're apart. Only because she's suddenly become receptive. She's suddenly become more open, and it's amazing how just that mind shift, that little change in attitude, where even if it was brought on, even though you resisted that for as long as you could, you didn't want to be able to do that, even though you resisted it for as long as you could. It's just amazing how that little change in awareness, in consciousness. And with Hannah, with Sandra, it's also an understanding of, yes, I can't be also now throwing my hands up in the air and saying, oh, woe is me and all this has happened. She also starts learning to become grateful. And gratitude is also a very important part, has a huge role to play in how we accept things. As soon as we are grateful for our situation, no matter what it is, it becomes easier to deal with and accept. I strongly believe that, at least.
No, these are powerful emotions that, when I can spend the whole day talking to you, but we have only 2 minutes left, and I want to touch on another very important aspect, and that is the relationship that Sandra has with her son. I mean, very often also, we forget that there's an impact on the younger ones as a result of our behaviors, and there's consequences, through this self-pursuit of your own greatness or whatever it is that you believe in. We often destroy very many lives. And one of those lives that you can destroy is your own child. Was this a very challenging role for you to write?
Yes, of course it was. It was very difficult for me, I think, in many ways, um, because motherhood is something that I will always write about in my books as well. They'll come through. I tend to write about women who are a certain age and who've already had children, been married, had children, and for me, it's one of the greatest emotions. It's one of the greatest blessings. I mean, me myself as a mother, I'm so blessed to be a mother. I'm so blessed to have children. I'm so blessed to be able to experience that. And at the same time, it's not always hunky dory. There are times when you and the kids are fighting, or you and the kids are at loggerheads, because that's just how life is. Especially if you've raised your children to be strong and independent and have their own identity and their own voice. Well, then it's gonna sometimes rub up against you. So that's life, and I think that's wonderful, because if you're learning to deal with challenges and emotions between a mother and son, or a mother and child, which is the closest bond someone can have, then surely it becomes easier in life. So yes, it was challenging to write, and I think a lot of Sandra's understanding of who she is also comes through as she slowly but surely starts repairing her relationship with her son. And that doesn't just happen because it was going to happen. I mean, there were many times in the book, when Sandra was thinking, this, I'll never be able to reconcile with my son. And then again, because of her being open to accept help from another person, completely unexpected, somebody who should be her sworn enemy, then that also unfolds. So wonderful conclusion in that sense.
Yes.
And some people have already asked, is there going to be a sequel? But no, I don't think so. I think this book is finished and complete as it is.
I think what for me is powerful, perhaps, and for many women, perhaps, who are also struggling with an issue of communication with their children, the techniques and the approaches, that Sandra takes in reaching out to her son is something that we can perhaps get from the book. And, if our viewers want to, you're welcome to read that and just see how she goes about healing and mending the fences with her son. But we're right at the end, Raashida. What message would you like to leave us with? And perhaps, something that you feel resonates.
Well, definitely to say, please, guys, if you can, get a hold of my books and read them. So this is the latest book. I don't know if you can see it. It's called The Cursed Touch. It's available from me, and by the end of the month, so probably by the time the show is aired, from Exclusive Books and Bargain Books. Also at many of the Islamic bookstores, Iqra, Baitul Hikmah, Al Ansar, CII. So please feel free. And if you have any challenges, feel free to reach out to me on my website, www.rashisreflections.com. And yes, all the messages that I want to give you are in my book. So please read them. And I'd love your feedback. I always say to people, if you like my book, if you don't like my book, you like my characters, give me your feedback. I love engaging with my readers. Jazakallah khair.
And I think they're going to enjoy engaging with your readers and with you as well, as much as I do. I feel that even if we might not totally relate to a particular character, there's always some aspect of that character that one eventually begins to identify with, or perhaps even sees maybe a reflection of oneself and say, maybe that's me. I need to reevaluate how I can be better or do better. But thank you for that, Raashida, because it certainly is a lesson in life. And I think every now and then we need a reminder. As I wrote recently, I said that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, فَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ ذِكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, that give reminders because reminders benefit the believers. So we need reminders about the challenges in life, but also about the way in which we handle ourselves and how we treat other people. And I think Sandra, as you call her, is a very good example of that, of sometimes how we get so caught up, we forget how we deal with other people. So thank you very much for this. And we look forward to chatting with you again, I'm sure. And I do hope that my viewers will reach out. I will put out your contact details onto the site so that they can reach you as well. في أمان الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.